We're live for round two.
And we're live.
So, um,
So have we got it all figured out yet? Pretty much, eh?
it's been over since the beginning. Oh man. Okay, so I just wrote. I went back into our conversation. I went up to see what had kicked off, what I said that kicked off this new level of trying to find reconciliation. So the new formulation that I had come with that I found might reconcile us is that, so you're insistent on the purpose, because I think we can create closure on the sense that we understand absolute reality in a way. We've described it in a way. I think the issue becomes the why, so the purpose of it and meaning. So I think we have to get into what purpose is, what meaning is, what are the relationship between the two, how it emerges, and how can we justify our answers for what absolute purpose and meaning is. So that would be the first thing to do, and then we can go into finding out how to reconcile. Or if you want, I could just reiterate what I thought would reconcile our two worldviews on this, and then work back from there. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. The last one. You go ahead and
Okay.
work backwards.
So I'm just going to read verbatim. I think I've arrived at a better formulation to resolve this qualm that I have with the notion of game and potential. So, to reiterate, you believe that the absolute purpose of Maya, or of reality and how it creates a game, is for entertainment. So, it is a game to begin with. That's how you're defining it. And the purpose of the game is entertainment, to get out of. And what is that entertainment? It is to get out of the game.
Yeah,
So,
like a mystery or a labyrinth. Yeah.
okay. So that I'm steel manning you here. I want to make sure that I'm really accurately describing what it is that you mean. Now, what I think. So you say that ultimately there, at the same time, nothingness doesn't exist. There is no void. It's
Not
an
in the
error
way
in
that we,
length.
not in the conventional conceptualization of it. Yeah.
Okay. And the proper way to conceptualize it is to see it as potential. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that reminds me of a South African theoretical physicist and philosopher, a really famous guy named George Ellis. He has this theory called possibility spaces. That, it's supra physical, so it has nothing to do with physics, but at the same time, it's a space where possibilities emerge. Interesting. But so he says that
Come back, man. Come back to us.
I'm back. Am I back?
Don't you leave me, man. Don't you leave me.
It's my internet, I think.
Okay.
Uh, Let me. Maybe I should switch to
I've got
my
Elon,
phone's
so it
internet.
can't be
I
me.
don't know. Should be okay. Well, yeah, it's got to be me. Let me switch to my mobile data just in case.
Oh, you're gonna burn through that?
Okay, is that any better?
Yes, it appears to be better. Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm in Tunisia, so right now I don't know. I think there might be some issues with internet. But so what was the last thing that I said? What was the last thing that you got?
Oh, I can't remember anything.
Yeah, yeah, me neither. Okay, so I think we're talking about potential,
Right, meaning,
and that.
yeah, potential specifically. Yeah.
Okay, so ultimately there is no nothingness. The way we should conceptualize things is that ultimate reality is just pure potential. And I had mentioned George Ellis, who is a theoretical physicist and philosopher who has this idea of a supra physical reality. So it's still in existence, an existential thing, but it's not related to physics. It's called the possibility spaces. Kind of an interesting thing. I don't know much about it, but so I just wanted to throw that out there as an interesting fact. But anyway, so okay, so going back to my notes, to me, if that's the way you see it, then the first question is really the infinitely regressive question. I mean, the potential is for what? And so, what is that potential for? If everyone were to be enlightened, there would still be a worlds that created us, or the, the matter and physics and all that. And even if you say that even that would go away, well, then the game would end, right? And for what does it mean for the game to end? Does it mean that nothingness emerges, or it just remains potential? Because if it remains potential, then the game will go on forever. You see?
Well, it depends on what perspective you're talking about. So in my worldview, I guess it'd be kind of like the idea of world lines, and each individual, each consciousness, if you will, that's their own world. So that's kind of the only way that you can do it. So my analogy, I guess, is that in a movie theater, there are many consciousnesses watching one reality, right? Experiencing one reality. But in this movie, there's a single consciousness witnessing many realities. So that's how I reconcile a person becoming enlightened. So it gets away from solipsism, right? In my perspective, that's how you dodge solipsism.
Yeah, but so I see it the same way. I think it's one reality. It's watching
one consciousness
many
watching many
consciousnesses.
worlds.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, like if that's what it is, and it's doing that forever, right? I mean, it can't stop doing that. I'm guessing.
Yeah, but from again, so the absolute, it's a paradox because we're mixing time and the relative in with the absolute, I guess, because the absolute, there is no time. And this is, as soon as you enter time into the equation, it all ends up into this, turtles all the way. You can't avoid it because again,
So
you're mixing metaphors in a way. Like in the absolute, there is no time. So
yeah,
how
that
do
makes
you
sense. So, but is it eternal then? It's not about time, but is it eternal that the game goes like the game is the game, or is it eternal that there's nothingness, or that after the game ends, would it just be eternal nothingness? Because if you say that there is no nothingness
it,
and the game can end, then there is nothingness at some point. Do you see what I mean?
so this is the whole
Mm.
so there's awareness, right? There's still you, but there's awareness without content. So this is where I make a distinction between awareness and consciousness,
Yeah.
is that consciousness is the content of awareness, and awareness can exist without content, as in the state of dreamless sleep.
Yeah. And is that
So
awareness interchangeable with potential?
yeah, it's the same word. It's a different word for the same phenomenon.
Okay. So that's
Or
what I'm
self
saying is that
as well. Self can be thrown in there as well.
so if awareness on the most fundamental level is creating the game, and the game is to get out of the game and just return to base state, like is this the samsara that you're talking about?
The Sams, the, s-
The cycle,
yeah, the
like
samsara is the entrance into the game, I guess.
okay, so that's what I'm saying is like then there is an infinity, which is this infinite loop where so that's what I'm trying to say is if that's
Time itself, I
uh,
guess, right, is the introduction of infinity.
yeah, but no, I mean like even if you step outside of time, space time, and it's just this loop between. We're saying for all intents and purposes, we need to use it, the word time, but it's better to say eternity because it's solid, it's fixed. It has nothing to do with this fluid, causality of time.
But eternity, it has a connotation of being time based, right?
Yeah,
Eternity
it,
is infinity. It
well,
is
that's
in
the beauty of it. I think it could be both. I mean, like if eternity exists, then there is no time as well, right? If you think about it, I mean, it's like the block universe. They say that the future and the past, it's all exists at once. So if it all exists at once, there is no time in the manner that we think of it in terms of like there being a progression. It's not about a progression. It's just
Yeah, well, the mind, like I think the wave function is probably a mathematical expression of basically everything happening at once. But that's the mind aspect of
yeah,
the dual system, right? So a body can exist at different. So okay, so here's something. What about? So I'm saying that a location. I have to change the
mhm,
conceptualization of what a location is. So a location to me isn't two coordinates on an imaginary grid, right? A made up grid. A location is Roy Dobson, right? Like to the infinite, to consciousness itself, Roy Frank Dobson is a location, right? So
yeah,
every time I'm in this realm, this is my location.
yeah, yeah. See, here's the
So
thing. Like,
body can be in different. I am in the same place at different times in this realm, right? That place being Roy Dobson. And the mind aspect of self is being at every place at the same time, right?
yeah. So I think we don't even need to get into that because we both understand that. I think we've gotten away from that confusion of space and time and language. I think we should just stick more to like the meaning of all that and the absolute purpose. So to steer it back to the beginning, the question for you is how do you get away from the problem of infinite regress when it comes to the answer that you have for the purpose of all of this? Like when you say that the purpose is to beat the game or to end the game, and the reason the game emerged to begin with was for entertainment, there's still the question like, what's the purpose of that? And also, where do you get the authority to say that
Yeah, well,
that is what's
that's
happening?
this is exactly what I'm saying. And meaning actually is meaning is the search for conclusion of what
Mhm.
you're doing, right? That's what meaning is. When you come to the meaning, right? Meaning is singular.
Absolutely,
You can't
not
have
relative.
meanings, right? You can't have
Yeah.
meanings. So once you find the meaning of all of this, of life itself, then that shuts down the process of infinite regression or turtles all the way or just keep asking more questions, right? That's what the purpose of meaning is is to finally conclude this,
Is to not have meaning anymore,
is
or
to
not have
not
relative meaning.
ask the question anymore because you've found the meaning. You
But what
found
is that? And
you
that's where it
found
becomes circular. What is the meaning then? You say you found the meaning, which is
the meaning.
to get out of the loop of meaning, or
The once you found the meaning, it concludes the need to ask the question.
yeah. So the meaning can't be described in your view.
No, again, it's whatever metaphor you decide that whatever metaphor or system of thought that gets you to the point to realize that thought needs to be transcended, that's your final meaning, right? That's your absolute meaning is whatever thought is the
Yeah.
final one that says, okay, well, I'm going to conclude thought now.
Yeah. Okay. So that seems to be what I think makes sense from the human consciousness level, but the level of absolute consciousness, like what is the meaning of that? It's for, is it the same for absolute consciousness to
None of it makes any sense. Like none of it from the absolute, there's none of this process, right? It's just stillness. Like it's kind of like, well, what's the difference between stillness and movement? Like, so until you get to really, really, really deep meditative states, I guess, a person probably won't completely grok what I'm talking about. Right? Like
yeah,
you
'cause-
have to get to the thought-free state, the effortless thought-free state, I think, for many, 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 many hours in order to grok what I'm talking about.
yeah. So
Because
this
it's
is
an
where
experience, not another thought.
I would ask you the same question Daniel posed, which is like, if all forms of consciousness or sentience that was like a part of the main sentience or whatever, if it were all to stop thought? Because that's the question. I mean, is it just specific to humans, or is it also that thought in animals would be required for that to stop as well? Like, do you see what I mean? Like, if humans were to stop thinking, there's transcended thought entirely, the whole world would go away.
I think
Correct?
you have to stick to first person perspective, because first person perspective is the only perspective there is. No one's ever had any other perspective other than. So
That's
as difficult as it is for the egoic thinking mind to come to grasp what all this means. I mean, you have to just get there. You just have to get there many, many times and just abide in that to finally be able to
Yes.
conclude all these questions.
And do you believe that, like, so then the question becomes why, like, and so
And
again,
then you just said, well, and then the question comes,
yes, you're right. So you transcended questions altogether, but it's still, that's the interesting thing is when you say, why did this whole process start where we needed to conclude everything and transcend questions and transcend thoughts? Like, why did it start all of that? And then,
for
you know,
entertainment.
and that's what I'm saying. So yeah, so to me, this is where I can finally broach, like, where the rupture between your theory and mine is, that I'm willing to absorb the triune system, the seeing the absolute, like, stillness that way. I think it really fits in well with my system. Whereas I think you're insistent on this definition of absolute purpose, which I still claim comes with a simple, not simple, but it's a subjective decision, like a leap of faith, which can't really justify the question. Like, if you say that the purpose of all of that is entertainment, it's just as arbitrary as saying the purpose of all that is for the purpose of all that, or the purpose for all that is for, God to have company or whatever. I mean, people can place whatever they want there, and that's what I think. I maintain that. That's why I say that there is and there is not no absolute purpose at the same time. Like, the system is so complete and perfect that it allows everyone and anyone and even itself to have multiple absolute purposes and reasons for what's happening. So it's so much more sophisticated that, and so that was, I think, like, if you hold to your own and you don't transcend that, then I think that's why you're not willing to absorb, like, the duality system that I'm operating on, into your theory. That's where I would say, yeah, the rupture happens. Would you agree, or does that
Well,
make sense?
I think that you're.
Because if you think about it, like,
You
the,
admit
the
that
triune system is necessarily composed of duality. I mean, you can't get away; they work together, you know. And that
but
triangle is the one, you know.
the absolute is not dependent upon the duality,
Mm-mm,
and the
it's not.
duality is dependent upon the absolute. So there
Yeah,
is a meaning, there is a reality. Like, you admit that there is a meaning, and yet when I provide one that's really, really, really convincing, like it's pretty intriguing,
it's not.
I've got to
So
say, you just reject it, which is
no,
fine. But
it's not. But that's what I'm
if
saying.
it's if it's ultimately not your meaning,
Yeah.
then try to find another one, I guess. But what I'm telling you is that you are engaging in the exact process that I'm saying just never ends, because you just keep asking another fucking question.
Yeah, but see, you've answered the question, and and so that's a thought just as much. To say entertainment, that is a thought, and it doesn't release you from, to me,
But
the
it
thought
does,
realm.
because when I say that, it goes
Uh,
away, right? Like, this is again, when I use that phrase, you are attributing thought to be the final authority. This is what I'm saying. Like, this is what you're saying, is that because I describe the state as something, then that's what I am. You know what I mean? Like, it's that only appears as a description of my experience.
yeah.
the experience in a way is transcendent of me trying to explain it to you.
Yeah, I
So
understand
you keep
that.
thinking that, oh, there's a thought that is Roy, right? That this makes Roy or something. I just the
I think
answer
there
is
might,
me sitting in sats. Like the answer is me sitting in satsang. That's it.
yeah,
The
that's
answer is found in the transcendence of thought.
that's
So
what
if
I
you're not
that's
willing to go, if you're not willing to go and
yeah.
sit in the transcendence of thought, being in thought-free awareness, then you won't find the answer, because that's
Yeah,
the answer.
but that's what I'm trying to say is like I think we just have two different goals because you've achieved the goal.
Well, that's
My
fine. Yeah,
question is,
that's fine.
but
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. But that's what's interesting to me is that even though you found the goal, you still are writing about your theory. You're still talking to me about it. Like, and so that is the question. Like, why are you doing that if you found the answer? So to me, it's like it just seems to me like what you're also wanting to do is play the game of being lost in this thought realm at the same time because you have no choice. And that's what I'm trying to say is like if what my goal is essentially is not. I mean, I think it's possible to have realized that the stillness, the perfection, the completeness, and at the same time play the game because that's what it's doing. And so like that's where I think you're very inflexible, and that you don't need to be because you are still engaging in this, and I don't think you have a choice anyway. Do you see what I mean? Like, why can't we try to describe? That's another level of complexity. I mean, what we're doing, you and I, it's we're trying to describe insofar as we can describe it with language, and I think that's fine. That's another. It's going to be incomplete, and that's why I call my book Infinity Limited. It will necessarily be limited, but can we right at the boundary? How far can we get? And that's what I'm saying. So I'm thinking you're doing the same. Like you're just trying to delineate the boundary insofar as it's possible, and it'll be incomplete necessarily because, like you said, you just got to sit there if you actually want to experience completeness. But that's why I'm saying like you're not just sitting there and experiencing completeness. You're playing part of the game, where you're going forward into infinity, right?
There seems to be something about truth that wants to be shared. Like
Yeah.
Ramana Maharshi, when he realized his enlightenment at 16, he went and sat in the basement of a temple in a unused room, and he was just going to sit there until he freaking starved to death and died and went to moksha. But
Yeah.
someone found him and started feeding him and dragged him out of there. So even Ramana Maharshi, the body that was Ramana Maharshi, didn't have the choice either, right? The universe had bigger plans for him, I guess, right? So
Yeah.
there is this the karmic momentum, I call it, of even when you realize all this, the body just doesn't disappear, right? It just doesn't, like a video game, just disappear or something. Like there seems to be some sort of, okay, then at death, you're liberated finally, right? But there still seems to be a karmic momentum. You let go of the brake, you let go of the gas completely, but that movement still needs to unwind somehow. And then at death, then it all stops. The process stops at death.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, yeah, like I said, I think that it becomes more of a personal question at that point. I mean, if to you it's fine for people to have different conclusions as to what the absolute meaning and purpose of all this is, then it's still compatible and in line with what my belief is, which is that it's exactly that it's paradoxical, that there are multiple and an infinite amount of different purposes and meanings that emerges from the system, and that the absolute purpose of the system is perhaps that to just generate absolute meaning and absolute purpose infinitely. So that could be one way of saying that it's reconciled as well.
Yeah, there's always a reluctance. There's always been a reluctance to accept my model, because I don't know why, because it concludes everything.
Yeah, but it depends because, like I said, it concludes everything from your point of view as in terms of you've experienced that conclusion. But in terms of the actual description of what conclusion is, it isn't concluded. That there's still
Oh, yeah,
there's
the descriptor, because again, it's the actual direct experience of a
yeah.
person doing this, sitting in stillness.
Well, here's the thing: it's both. Like that's what's fucking amazing to me. I mean, yeah, to me,
The description of it requires both, right?
yeah. Well,
It's not
yes,
both, but the description of it requires both.
it requires both, and at the same time, like here's what's beautiful. I think you might not see this yet, but I see a superposition between the Triune system and duality. Like there's a superposition
No, no,
there. Like
you're
look,
you are
it's a
creating turtles
meta.
all the way. You're
Yes,
just
yes,
throwing another fucking turtle into the mess when I'm saying
yes. But that's what I'm trying to say is that the turtle, right? It doesn't matter. Like it's both. It's both. Like it's both that there's turtles all the way down and that are no turtles. Like that's what's crazy. Like you can experience nothingness, stillness, no turtle whatsoever, and at the same time they're parallel with each other. There is an infinity of turtles. Like that's what I'm trying
yeah,
to say is that
there's the potential to see it in another way, I guess.
yeah, and so that's why I think like for me, what everything you're saying is compatible. It's just the way I see it is this is what I was saying. I disagree with the dogmatism of like Eastern philosophy and gurus and stuff, is that they go into enlightenment, they reach a certain level, and then they come back to the world and say, there's this is enlightenment, and that's it. And anyone who challenges it with the infinitely regressive question, of course, they usually become very dogmatic, very
Yeah,
set in their
because
ways.
there's only one reason. We've already
But
discussed this. There is a singular reason, and it's not different over there or over
but
there or for this person. It's singular, and that's why they don't give. And then people say, "Oh, well, they're just
not
closed-minded."
necessarily.
Like,
But
no, they're
wait,
not closed-minded. They found the reason.
not necessarily, because here's the thing: the reason itself. That's what I'm saying is it's eternal and not time, not space, none of that stuff. I'm saying that the level of enlightenment I think is so eternal that you as the person who's experiencing it is still limited. You're not God.
As
You're not
as as a God appearing as Roy Dobson is
exactly.
appearing as a
So
limited being.
that's what I'm saying is like there's an eternity to experience. There's an eternity to enlightenment as well. I mean, that's what it is. You're eternally enlightened. If you were truly eternally enlightened, you wouldn't exist. That's what I'm saying. Like if when Ramana died, then he returns to God consciousness. But that's what I'm saying is that you get these gurus who go and they preach and they preach and they preach, and it's like, well, why preach when you've already achieved enlightenment, right? And anything that contravenes becomes a threat to it, and it's like, well, you shouldn't feel threatened at all because you understand that they're just in the
Only the
game.
ego feels threatened.
Yeah. So
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 in a way,
that's what
some of the teaching, you've got to realize that if this teaching is if it's grading on you, that means it's showing something about the ego.
exactly. That's what I see.
If you're resisting about something, perhaps it's not because it's incorrect. It's perhaps you don't want to accept it.
That's exactly what I see. Like I see the irony of like the enlightenment gurus who are dissolving their ego and at the same time like inflating a sense of ego through that dissolution. It's like they're experiencing the enlightenment, but only to a certain level because they can only experience it to a certain level. They cannot actually experience it fully. They would have to die. And so, but they get stuck with that ego of like, I have transcended. It's like, well, the fact that you're saying that you're
That
here,
only appears as ego to another ego.
I don't know.
Like no one would call bullshit on Christ like nowadays. If well, of course, you could probably wouldn't recognize Christ if he came again anyway. But you know what I mean, right? Like I remember it came to my consciousness that when you asked, well, how do you have the authority to come up with these final conclusions? And I'm saying, well, what was the authority of Christ? Like, why
Right.
did Christ have the authority to say that he and the Father were one? Like, well,
Yeah.
that's blasphemy, right? So, but
Right.
at some point, you go with some people, you go, ah, right? Like if Jesus says that and some fucking buffoon says that, well, there's a difference there.
Yeah, I think like the authority. So to steelman you again, I think the authority comes from the fact that you are God consciousness anyway. Like, you know what I mean? Like the authority is there. I mean, we're looking at ourselves in the mirror. So like, I think, but what I'm saying is that's the whole point. If you have the authority, you have the authority to say it's entertainment, and I have the authority to say it's for meaning or it's for companionship or whatever. Like the authority is what I'm trying to delineate is the authority between the limited self and the universal self. So like the authority comes from the universal self, but if the limited self wants to have a perfect reflection back at the universal self, you can't say that absolute purpose and meaning is one thing or another. You literally have to say that it's in a superposition, which is that there is and is no absolute purpose. Either the absolute consciousness generates absolute purpose and meaning infinitely, which is pure potential. Basically, it's interchangeable with pure potential. So like that's why duality is so powerful. Is that because we are beings of differentiation, we have no choice to be chained through duality. The interesting part is because we also have consciousness. That's the triune state. That's why the triangle and the eye is that you can be both. You can have the triune, like the third state, which is just perfect stillness, perfect potential, and what that generates, which is duality. So to me, you always have to say it's both. That's why the triangle, that's why the eye inside the triangle. Like the triune system is so powerful for that very reason. It necessarily includes duality.
Well, then,
And
yeah, I mean, humanity itself, human consciousness itself kind of is in a superposition of being limited and the absolute, right?
yes, that's exactly it.
That's why we're in such a fucking mess and such a kerfuffle, is because
And
we're so self-aware, is that we can see in our periphery the dualism. We can see the body and the
right.
mind aspects of ourselves because we're so close to being self-realized, but we're just stuck. We're just a
But
little
that's
bit stuck on the mirror images. Like which one is the right one,
which
right?
one?
Which one is
Exactly.
fundamental? And it's the person doing this, looking from mirror to mirror, that's the fundamental. But
Exactly.
that is completely the Tao. That
So
cannot be
here's
described. So that is the zero, and that is what is the
okay.
nothing
So
or the
here's the
potential.
interesting thing, though. You say it's a mess. Now I say it's
It's
a
kind of
mess and it's not a mess. I'm
it's a
saying it's
beautiful mess. It's a beautiful mess.
yes,
Like the
it's both.
Mandelbrot set is fucking gorgeous, right? I think
Yeah.
it's the most beautiful thing possibly that could ever be. And it's in and another thing is that it's in infinite, which is in itself mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
Something that's infinite could be as boring as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, repeating like that, or it could be something as absolutely gorgeous as the Mandelbrot set. So the
Yeah.
Mandelbrot set, if that is all of manifestation, then it includes everything: the good, the bad, the ugly, the suffering. Everything is in there in the Mandelbrot set, and it's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
perfect and it's beautiful. But at some point, like I say, you just go, meh, okay, well, I'm done watching the Mandelbrot set, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going into like that's actually all those colors is the escaping of the set, right? It's
Yeah.
escaping.
But that's the thing. You can stop watching the Mandelbrot set. You can't stop being the Mandelbrot set.
Yeah, you can. Well,
No, do you see?
it's the blackness, the actual image, the shape that is the black, that is staying within, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. But
then the
that's what
reason
I'm
why
trying to
it's
say
black because
is
it's undefinable. It's the Tao, right? It's black. It's
yes.
indefinable.
That's the pleroma, and that's what I'm trying to say. It's the same thing, right? And ultimately, that's why there's a parallel there, and that's why you and I are jumping from one track to the other. Sometimes we're on opposite tracks, and we're saying, no, you have to come on this side. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is like we can so easily agree, and we can so easily disagree, precisely because we are on that superposition state, and we're like in a meta level, going back from mirror to mirror, like you said, looking at one side to the other,
I
and
don't think
so.
we're disagreeing. I don't think our theories disagree at all. I think it's just our personal perspectives where we are in this path. I think that you you actually, and you've admitted this yourself, you say, well, I still want to play in the game. So
Yeah, well, no,
in a
I'm
way,
not saying I
your
want to. I'm
ego is
saying
justifying it to say, yeah, it's okay if I do this.
no. What I'm saying is I have no choice, and it's both. Like, here's the thing. That's why I'm saying, like, you're here talking to me. Like, you're not doing what Ramanov was doing by just sitting there until you die. So, like,
You've been to one of my satsangs, at least one.
I have, and what
So
I'm
what
saying
am I
is,
doing there? What am I doing there, James?
yes, you are, but you're not just doing that. You also have no choice to play the game, which is that you're sitting there, right? That's what I'm trying to say. Is it's both.
Yes, we had perhaps the final one of the choices that we made was to enter this realm, and then after that, anything that happens, there's no choice. But perhaps the choice was to enter this game, right? The fundamental choice is
Yeah.
whether or not to enter this game. And then after that, you have no choice but to play the game.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is that's what ultimate consciousness is doing. I mean, it's not playing the game, and it is playing the game, and it's both. It's always, it seems to be both. And once you do that, once you take the duality, superimpose both extremes together, you get that third state, and you, that's what I'm trying to say.
It's fantastic. Like it's absolutely amazing. And like what I said, I did soften my view a little bit for you, I think, because I said most people don't even understand that there is the potential to not do this anymore. Like all those people that have committed suicide, right? That's basically what they're saying, is that I have the choice to end this. But that unfortunately does not end this. Suicide does not conclude the game. It's just starts a new level, and you're just a basic sidestep. You're just starting off where you ended off. So it's what's great about what you want to do, I think, is that, and it's so important to just let people know that there is a choice, that you don't have to continue on, because in a way, when you look at this and you say, well, if I have no choice but to just keep going on and on and on and on in birth and death and experiencing the fucking Mandelbrot set forever, well, that's not freedom either, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
That's
whoever
beautiful.
wants to conclude the game, that they can be in my group,
Yeah.
and I can lead them to the conclusion of the game. And if you don't want to, well, my group says that's fine too, right? We're not going to say we don't need to evangelize because we are dealing with truth, and people who are evangelizing are trying to manufacture truth by having just more people believe all the shit that they believe.
Yeah, that's a better way to start. I'm starting to see that. Yeah, and like where I stand in relation to that seems to be that I want to show, like you said, yeah, I want to show that there is that option, but I also think that realizing that there is that option, in addition to the whole dual thing that we're doing all the time, is that you can, if you actually create that superposition inside the game, right, you will actually necessarily create the perfect balance, which is why balance is always such a big part of Eastern philosophy, usually. And so I see paradoxes everywhere, literally. So I'll give you the freedom paradox. You mentioned freedom, and so I was thinking, okay, that's a good opportunity. Here's the beauty of it. There is freedom in constraint, right? And that is a paradox. Why? Because constraint is the definition of constraint is the absence of freedom. But at the same time, it creates a parameter within which you can move around freely. If you have absolute freedom, it's the same thing as imprisonment, because there's no relativity there anymore. For us as limited beings, though, that's what I'm talking about. So for humans, we experience a freedom paradox always. People always try to be free, free, free. But imagine that you had no. So we're going to take the physical example to like put people through this. Whoever's going to be watching this. You are free. You have all the money in the world. You're free to travel, do whatever you want. Okay, great. That's an extra access to freedom, a bigger box. Let's remove the parameters of that box a little bit further out. Now you can fly. You don't need to breathe anything. You can go out into outer space and you can sort of see the stars and whatever. Cool. Then you're experiencing the beauty. So you have the freedom to experience the beauty of the universe. That's great. You start to see quasars and whatever the fuck else. Then you go even further. You can you travel intergalactic, whatever. Then you end up in like just black space. There's nothing. There's no relativity. And then you go further. You're dissolving yourself. There is no relativity whatsoever. What is there to experience? There is no freedom whatsoever from the limited human being's point of view. It's almost the same as pure stillness as the universal self, but because you are still you have like the limited being, you're experiencing a human consciousness, you're completely imprisoned. There is nothing around you whatsoever, no relativity, no beauty to be experienced, no experience whatsoever, and yet you're trapped by your human consciousness. At that level, you would have to go in and say, okay, I got to get out of this prison. It's the ultimate prison. I'm too free.
Maybe what you've probably just described is death, my friend.
Yeah, well, it's ego death. I mean, you have no choice to go in. You'd be in such a hell.
I mean, physical death. You probably just described physical death.
Physical death.
If the ego arrives in the death state without realizing their enlightenment, they'll freak out and they'll create something relative again to have another experience. So well done.
Yeah. So that experiment, you're right. It would be death, because think about it. Your hand is still relevant to your other hand.
I was going to say that. I was going to say, if you're there, you can still do this.
Exactly. So you still have relativity. So then you would start to remove your own body parts to increasingly be free. And then and so you're talking about death. You're absolutely right. So that's the freedom paradox. If you're going to continue playing the game, you're not going to sit there, like you say, and just
that's the ultimate freedom, isn't it? You're free to play the game and you're free to end the game.
Exactly. It's both. It's crazy.
From like the way you just and that's it. Like, and then why can't we just stop there?
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of it. Because,
and this is where I'm going to really drop the bomb and I'm going to really make a statement that you're going to say, well, you have no authority to say that. So I'm going to say that the only purpose of thought, the voice in your head, is, and all of it, thought or sensations, is just to have something relative to self as an inference for your existence, right? So you don't know who you really are. You don't know that you're the absolute, and you don't require anything relative to you for your existence. Then you always will need something there, something relative to you in order for you to know that you exist. So that's why Descartes said, I think, therefore I am.
That's not at all something to disagree with. I completely agree. There's the authority is not even relevant at that point. Okay. That's, to me, the cleanest way to think. And that's the perfect segue to the other thing that I said. I am, right?
Mm-hmm. And that could be the zero. Man, you are fucking gorgeous, my friend, because that got me still thinking about, 0 and 1. I am. There's the identity and the being in there.
And the being
the 0
in there
would be the being, and the 1 would be the I.
And we've switched it, right? Why? Because we say I first. And here's the beauty of it. Here's what I read to you. I am. Instead of
how can you say am I? Like, that's a question. Oh,
exactly. Right?
Oh no, you reverse it and it turns into a question. What have you done?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That so which comes first?
Oh, no.
Right?
You've turned God's words back onto itself into a question. Oh, you're gonna pay dearly for that one.
But I am God doing that. That's where the authority comes from. That's what I was telling you about. Like, here's which comes first. As humans, we say I come first. That's the ego. I.
Yeah. I am.
That's identity. But
the only way
isn't
God
identity.
Could have expressed it to a human, though.
Yes, and am isn't identity. It's being. But here's the thing. In order to have identity, you must first be. That's why I'm saying, am I? And that's why you said, because God is asking, am I? And through that creates all these reflections to know itself. And so the ultimate,
everything says yes.
Yes. And the ultimate identity is not to identify, not even to identify with being. That's what you're saying. You're saying God shouldn't even ask, am I? Or say, I am. Like, that's the ultimate dissolution, right? That's the ultimate stillness. So we're that's why I'm interested in the Gnostic text of Jung, because he talks about abraxas, which is God, but that's an even lower form. Like, the ultimate reality is even beyond God, which is the pleroma, which is what I think you're describing or attempting to describe
in the triune model.
Yes, like it makes no sense to discuss it at all.
It's a plurality that's one. You always have to get back to one. You always have to get back to the
it's not even one. I mean, it's so fucking fundamental that it's not even one. Like, it's not even 0 or 1. It's pure dissolution. That's why I'm glad you read the text.
You can't just, you're doing turtles all the way, and it's so easy to slip into turtles all the way. But that's Brahman and Atman is also 0 and 1.
Right? No, but what I'm saying is the pleroma is neither. Like, it's so.
Yeah, but that's Brahman. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
the Jung was just stealing from Hinduism. Like, if you understand Brahman, you can't go beyond Brahman.
You can call it Brahman.
You can call it Bob if you want. Like, he could have called it Bob.
That's where I think you make an error.
It's the absolute. It's this. Well, okay, you're just attributing another relative name to the absolute.
No, that's what I think. But that's what I just think you're making the error. You always say, no, it's not that, it's this. But so, like, it's just by symmetry of identity. It's not Brahman. I could say it's X or it's whatever. So I think, like, that's where I say I think, like, you make a mistake of, you think that people aren't being honest, or they're not accepting, or they're doing a turtle the way down. It has nothing to do with turtle the way down. We necessarily have to give a name to the indescribable, the Tao, Brahman, pleroma. It doesn't really matter. All I'm saying is the content of what that name represents seems to be that a pure dissolution. It makes no sense to discuss it, and it's, absolute stillness is absolute potential.
Yeah, but Jung, of course, but again, Jung, being as brilliant as he was no Ramana Maharshi, right? He didn't realize it. Jung wasn't enlightened. He was just really, really, really smart.
I don't know. I mean, there's no way for us to know, and that's what I'm saying, is because that's where I think you might be delving into God complex, because that's the superposition of the ego with, like, the enlightenment thing that I was telling you about.
Well, a person who says I'm God, I guess, has a God complex.
Yeah.
But it's not an incorrect statement to say that I'm God.
It isn't, but it's an incorrect thing or experience.
It's Roy Dopson, the body and the mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by God complex, right? A lot of people.
Most people say that. They think that, my name here, your name here is God.
Yeah.
Well, then you should be able to fly around and levitate and make things, manifest out of nowhere. But that's not the case. Yeah.
So I think, like, again, I think it's kind of easy for us to always infinitely, ironically, talk about it, and then it'll just be like this flip, and then you'll say, "Oh, James, you're doing the turtles all the way down thing," or no, you're realizing, And again, that's why I'm saying it's both. It's always both. This very discussion kind of demonstrates the functioning, the duality functioning of thoughts. And we can return to the stillness, or we can talk about thoughts and then talk about turtles, and you know what I mean? It's just switching between these two tracks, and that's what paradoxism is. So I know you said you watched my video, so that I talk about this equation, right, where infinity equals existence plus not non-existence, because non-existence doesn't exist in order to be added onto. It's existence plus consciousness, in a way, or the paradox, the alethetic paradox, in parallel with nothingness. In parallel, it must be. And nothingness is a representation. I mean, it's a representative of void. And void is interchangeable with pure potential or absolute consciousness or absolute whatever. So we're always on this, like, parallel where we can never really.
Because of our bias towards materialism and physicalism.
Yeah.
Then that becomes skewed.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just describing, like, really the boundary where humans, like, lose the ball and what's happening, really. you could either see it that way. You could say that humans are making a mistake, or God is manifesting humans to be making mistakes, that you perceive it that way. You can see it either way. I mean, that's why I'm saying ever since I've sort of like this emerged. I'll tell you the story if you want, how I got to this level. I'd like to know yours, but ever since this state emerged and I started seeing all this truth, I was like, well, you go through different phases. The God complex, I had that issue as well, and thinking you're crazy, which is the opposite side of God complex. Like just both. You go through all this stuff,
Yeah.
and eventually, I just realized like, that you see that everything you experience just became ever since then. Everything I experience is always both. I see a complete compatibility. There is no contradiction, and at the same time there's tons of contradictions, and yet all these contradictions are compatible. It's so weird, and the only way to escape that, like you said, is perfect stillness. But at the same time, because you're not still, because you're experiencing all this, and this is all happening for a reason, that's where we fall into the debate again. It's just so beautiful. And so I experience beauty everywhere. I never feel like, unless someone becomes antagonistic, like, and says something like you're stupid or whatever, then of course I'll feel something. But if someone's idea, whatever someone presents like idea, I never really feel like it's wrong, because it can't be. Like, that's how awesome this generating truth is. It's just always so much perspectives.
See,
Yeah.
I think you see paradox everywhere, because you realize this separation between thought and sensation, right? You recognize there's something a little fishy going on between our correlation between words and actions, I guess. Like you're very cognizant. You just don't take thoughts to be, I don't know. You just recognize, you're starting to recognize
that there's a concept, pre-perceptual concept. There is a concept that we have, which is just our consciousness, really, ultimate consciousness, which is pre-perceptual.
Yeah,
and so because we, like you said,
perception and conception thing, you understand that there's a difference there, whereas most people don't even, right? They don't even, it doesn't dawn on them that there's a difference there. That when they're having an experience of something, right? They're having sensations, a combination of sensations, and they actually believe that's a spoon, right? Whereas you go, well, no, that spoon is that the spoon, thought spoon, is kind of is just superimposed over top of that experience and isn't that experience. So that's where paradox comes in. I mean, every time, you get it.
So that's what I'm saying, is like, if you can zoom out and like just say that everything we've talked about in these last two sessions, like, what would that be? Like, what would the statement be? And that's why I call it infinity limited. I mean, the statement will necessarily be incomplete, but that's as far as you can go. You can actually make a statement that is as complete as it can be as a human being. And that's what the infinity limited is, or the Triune system.
And then, so let's say that you come up with a theory that's thought-based. See, this is what's happening, is that I think science is trying to prove something as fact, and then that will get you to the meaning. But I keep saying the final theory needs to be metaphor, because you truly don't understand something until you've done it or been it, right? You don't understand what baseball is until you've played baseball. You can't just read the rule book and know baseball. So in the end, it has to be metaphor, because metaphor includes it infers experience, right? Like I'm relating this to this person through thought, but it's also including an experience, right, that this person has had before, a shared experience. So that's complete knowledge, right? Complete understanding is when you can apply a theory to your direct life.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is I think it might be so powerful and profound that if you simultaneously you're aware of like you and you're enlightened in a way, you're aware of this superposition or the triune or all of that, and at the same time while you're acting in the world, which is illusory, you can apply the superposition, which is what a paradox is. I mean, like it's a triune. I realized that today. I was like, the paradoxical loop is what? I mean, it's
But I
nothingness
thought
in the
you
center.
realized that our last talk.
Yeah, like you have one side, two side, and then the middle, which is the superposition of both sides. So it's a triune. A paradox is a triune,
I
essentially.
know. This is what this is. I had the
Right?
reverse because when you started talking about paradox, I'm like, holy fuck, paradox is a superposition. Like
It
that's
is.
I never
It's
really.
a triune.
It's funny because I started. Everything is so synchronous, right? Because I started working on paradox just a couple of weeks ago. Like this whole paradox. Well, I shouldn't say that because I've been on this nothing thing for quite a while, but it's
Yeah.
really starting to coalesce now into a theory for me. So
Yeah.
then I meet you, right? It's just like, well, yeah,
Me
okay.
too. My life
There's a
is
reason for that.
yes, my life is synchronous as fuck too. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah.
and so if you apply the superposition, if you apply the triune system paradox thing to everything, and I mean it could be
That's
as
what I
abstract.
mean. It needs to be taught.
Yeah.
This
Yes, it
needs
needs to be taught.
this can be a model as simple as it is
Yeah.
for society,
For
for
law,
life,
for art, for
everything.
check it out. It's crazy. I literally in the
Dude, we
Discord
got to
chat.
do this.
That's what I'm working on in the
Yeah.
Discord chat. I
I
literally,
should
I
join that fucking Discord chat. Can you
you
send
should.
me a link
It's
or something?
yeah. I'll send you the link, and I gave someone the artwork superposition just as an example, like and law as well. So I'm looking at the the note that I made, just so you can see what I mean by applying the superposition to things. Like it can apply to, you know, something as abstract as how to love someone, or as concrete as like how do we determine whether this person should be in jail or should be set free, like the law
And what
system, right?
about economics? Like,
It can be exactly. It can an economic system. It could be a
how far out
scientific
is
thing. Who knows?
economics nowadays? Like, we've got off the natural, we've gone off nature's program.
Yes, like I'm reading Thomas Sowell right now. I don't know if you know, but he's a famous economist, very brilliant dude. Thomas Sowell. He literally, it's pretty. I don't know. I'm just trying to learn more about economics, but I was just thinking like this, and this is why I like Tyler Goldstein because he has this video in the Pace One that talks about what a theory of everything should be,
Yes.
and he said it would necessarily have to be applicable to, I mean, everything. And if it can be pragmatic, then you've literally found the theory of everything. And this triune paradox thing, I'm kind of hyphenating it. Um, it's applicable to everything because it is everything. I mean, and so if you just realize, it's really just a realization. It's not about creating. So if you
That's what I
realize
say.
it, then
I say, just fucking sit and look at this triune system. Don't think about
yeah,
it. Don't try to
yeah,
analyze it. Just fucking sit there and just fucking look at the thing. Like, how can
yeah,
you not be blown away by this thing? I just don't understand it. How people
because
don't get
people
it.
are on either side. They'll be like
Yeah,
on one
they're
column or
always
the
on
next. They'll be
one
like
or the
negative
other
or
side.
positive.
Yeah.
That's why they
They're
don't see
trying
the
to
middle.
prove whether the positive is more fundamental than the negative or the negative is more fundamental than the positive. And you're just looking in fucking mirror images.
Exactly. And for we have to show people that. That's why I'm saying your column system is a better way to show it because it just shows that. Like, look at
Yeah,
that.
it's not a fucking graph, right? Like
Yeah,
everything's on a graph of a dualistic graph. You've
yeah,
just cut things into two, and now you're going to try to make the third thing the line on the graph. It's like, no, it's different. It's something different.
yeah.
It's lines and columns somehow. I don't know.
Okay, so I'm just gonna read this part just to tell you what I mean, like how applicable it can be, just with art, right?
Yeah.
First, I'm gonna go to this small resume. All art should be work, and all work should be art. So it's a superposition. The distinction between both is the dissolution of both, or incompleteness of both. work is without meaningful purpose if it is only to survive. Meaning that if you're just working to survive, then the purpose of surviving isn't very meaningful to you. And art is without purposeful meaning. So you can see how this reflective effect seems to happen in everything. There's always a reflection happening or a symmetry of identity. So art is without purposeful meaning if it is only to live for. And what that means is the meaning itself has no purpose, right? If it's only that, like, do you see what I mean? Art is without purposeful meaning if it is only to live for. So like, if all you're doing is living for, like, the purpose is to live for art, that's not very meaningful either. So when art and work are superimposed, purpose and meaning are also superimposed and become absolute, dissolving the question of absolute purpose. Manifestation is all that remains. So
I'm grooving on that, but I'm thinking it would be better to almost say, if art is just to look at, right? Art has to be, so you're separating yourself from the piece of art, right?
Yes, well, I mean,
so if art is just to look at, then perhaps it's lost its meaning.
I didn't mean, I didn't bring in the idea of observing art. It's just the experience of it. Like, when you're working, to me, it's like, I worked in a paper plant factory with when I was like 18, and all toilet paper. It's just, I'm on the assembly line. I grab the toilet paper, I stack it on a pallet, right? And the movements, like, my friend would take it, throw it to me, and I would take it, put it on the pallet, and there's specific patterns that we have to make so that the toilet paper doesn't fall off. And then we had to wrap the pallet with like a plastic.
Yeah, I worked in a grocery assembly plant for a while there. Yeah.
All right. So you know what I'm talking about. And the interplay, the ephemeral nature of the movements that my friends and I, this cooperation, and like, it felt like art. You know, some people say, oh, it's a fucking work of art, what I just did, even though it's like something you wouldn't consider art. Well, it's work and it's art. And it's also,
art of work. It's the art of work.
It's the art of work. And so, and when you're building something, if it's kind of like, all right, there, you can paint a wall, right? But does the color really matter? I mean, there can be a certain amount of utility there. If you paint it black, then it'll feel smaller, right? Whereas you can paint it white. But at the same time, like, where's the distinction between the utility and just the experience? I mean, if you paint it black, it's both the utility and experience, because you want it to look smaller, let's say, and you want the experience. Do you see what I mean? Like, I think that we shouldn't distinguish between art and work.
The reason to do something is to have the experience of doing that thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Work is doing something in order to get money.
Yeah.
Whereas everything that we do is to have the experience of doing that.
So that's what I'm saying.
There doesn't have to be a cause and effect, really.
Exactly. Because the moment we make that distinction of like, well, I'm doing this for money and I'm doing this for experience, then you're actually reducing both. Like, I think if it's both, like, if you're just manifesting, if the experience is to have the experience, even if that's making money, I mean, that superposition kind of brings you back to stillness in a way.
One should follow the other. You know, you should do what you enjoy experiencing. And the universe, if you fucking did that, the universe would take care of you, right? Yeah. If you follow your bliss, but that requires faith. You can't, that's not a system that operates on thought, right? You just follow intuitively somehow what you enjoy doing, what you enjoy experiencing. And not from an egoic basis, like, oh, I enjoy masturbating, so I'm going to get a job masturbating. It's not, no, I don't think that works. But you know what I mean? A bliss, a deeper contentment, a level of contentment.
So see, that applies to the personal life where we're talking about. But now it can apply to societal structures like the law, like I said, like the system. Because here's the thing, like, it always rests on a paradox. Like, at some point, if you go really down to like, why is this law set up this way? If you really get into like the epistemology and the philosophical, mindfuck of it, you realize that it rests on a paradox. Like, they can't actually answer that, and they just have to sort of go with the present moment. Like, present moment, the judge feels this over that, and that's it. They have to make that dualistic choice, because ultimately the system of law rests on these paradoxes, which is what paradoxes are. There are some that are, just false. They're an indication of falsehood. Some are veridical, meaning it's true and it's still paradoxical to our experience. And then there's the special paradoxes that I mentioned earlier. So ultimately, everything is on a paradox. There is no, like, you know what I mean? It's very difficult for the system of law to justify every action that they take. So to me, the question was, okay, wait, what if we don't apply paradoxism / triune system to this law system, but we supplant it? What if we were actually have lawyers and philosophers come together and actually build a paradoxical system of law, so that you have this triune state, so that you can actually have a dualistic framework that allows you to have the third triune answer at any. So this would be real time. It would shift. It would be a system that, and this is where I get more complicated, but essentially what a paradox is, right, is a self-regulating perfect system in balance with itself. So it's not like you don't place an output. That's the ego. When we say we want to put this person in jail, what's the justification for that? Let's take the thought experiment. If there's a murderer, a psychopath, we put him in jail because of the consequentialism, which is the philosophy or morality, the ethical system that we use to determine right from wrong. If you kill someone, it's wrong. Why? Because it causes the consequence of pain in the experience of consciousness in someone else. Great. But what if it's not that guy's fault? Like, what if he was born to kill? Like, he didn't do anything. Then you're creating this dilemma. And so, of course, again, how do you deal with the dilemma? Well, they're doing it now with pedophiles, right? Minor attracted persons, they're calling it. Like, should we like really stigmatize them at all? Like, is it wrong? Because really, it's not their fault. It's like, okay, well, do you see what I mean? Like, this is dangerous stuff. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's very dangerous.
I don't know. Don't know how you could regulate something like that, because again, the film is in the can, and they were going to do that anyway. Like that's.
Yeah. That's what I mean. You see what I mean? Like, there's still going to have to be a decision made at some point. Like, they're either going to put him in jail or set them free or do something in between. But the point is, what is the output, and how do you determine what the output is? Now, for now, because we're using ego, we say we want them in jail or we don't want them in jail, whatever it is. And we are setting our own outputs. But the triune system, it comes with its own balance point. Now, because we live in a world that's fluid, that balance point shifts. It changes. It expands. It in real time. That's why it shifts and it doesn't shift, and that's where it gets complicated. But really, the paradox, this was simple. The balance point is always in the middle. Now, the loops can get bigger and bigger or smaller and smaller, and so relative to the loops of the paradox, the center point will shift, right? In a way, at least it'll appear to shift, because when if you're on one side, you're moving further away from the balance point, right? So that's what I'm trying to say is the output already exists. The balancing point in the triune system is always there. So all you have to do is look at the polar opposites, the extremes, and you'll find the balance point. You'll see, as long as you pinpoint the absolute polar opposites and define them, you'll know what the output is. So it's not about choosing what we should do. It's about realizing what we should do. It's about it being revealed.
That gets a bit tricky when it comes to people's actions and stuff. Like with economics, I can see it working really well. But when you're talking about crime and psychological, I guess economy is it turns into psychology. But yeah,
you just have to define parameters, right? You have to define parameters where you say, okay, we can't get any more information, or it makes no sense to get any more information because there's a boundary there. So there's the utility boundary where we need to have utility. So you set the parameters there at the extremes.
Setting boundaries is good. Yeah, for sure.
So if you set if the parameters are simply the two extremes, no matter how far apart they are, you'll always be able to find that balance point.
See, I kind of see where you're going, but I think the more effective path for this is that if it was applied in school and in families and it was taught, then you would prevent crime and egoic behavior, right? So it's a preventive measure rather than trying to fix what happens afterwards. right? So I see it as, if you apply this model from day one, you know, you teach your kids, well, this is the way reality is, right? And it's taught in school, but you wouldn't even really need much of a school anymore, because all this relative shit would be nonsense. But I see it, if it's applied, it would be a preventative measure. It would,
Because it's already applied in some cases. Like, think about the West, right? We have free market economies. We have freedom of speech.
Sure we do.
Or no, not free market. No, not we don't. But
you know, on paper, yeah.
On paper,
the theory is that it should be, but we've
mixed economy. Let's say mixed economy is what I meant, because it's true, mixed economy. And so there is a balance. And here's the beauty of it: we have freedom of speech and all that, which means what? People can come with conflicting ideologies, and yet the system works. Like, the fact that there's all these conflicting ideologies in this free society creates the balance.
It doesn't fucking work, man.
No, but I mean, it doesn't work. But in relativity to what? Think about it. In the last 100 years, what we've done is like utopic in relation to everything else, right? We're not killing each other like crazy, and you know. So that's what I'm trying to say is, like, the mixed economy, freedom of speech, these like tenets of Western philosophy and civilization has relatively created a much better system of balance and abundance. And I mean, it's undeniable. And so to me, that's because you're literally including conflicting ideologies. You're literally including the extremes, and creating and finding the balance between that. That's always at risk of tilting. And I think in Canada, I mean, we're fucked. Let's not get too political, but we're losing that balance. But
yeah, well, everyone is simultaneously. So I mean, it's an indication that there's something wrong. Like, we've done, something's gone askew, even in the perfection of all of it. Something relatively has gone really wrong, and it's the unbalance of this system, right? It's the bias towards the yang. We're so biased towards the yang, but now, because of what's happening with the cycles, is that it's swinging back to yin. And this transition period is really is like a death, and it's very difficult for this adjustment phase, swinging back to yin. So again, it's trying to find the balance by almost like pouring one cup of water into the other to try to get them both level. But we must realize that the system itself is balanced naturally, and we just fuck it up. So we need to get back to our naturalness and stop interfering with it so much. Back to simplicity, right? Occam's razor, simplicity, just the paradox and the triune system. That's really all you need, because we don't really need to be micromanaged, right? We just need a little management. We just need a little bit of wisdom. A little bit of wisdom is equal to an infinite amount of intelligence. You know, it just, intelligence isn't working for us. So we need to get back to wisdom and realize that inherently everything is balanced. And the more we try to balance it, well, that creates the unbalance.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the input comes in.
It's a deprogramming of all of these systems, right? Like you say, supplanting them with something that's simple and basic.
Yeah, and necessarily, because it's too complex now. You have like macroeconomics. How are you going to understand all this bullshit?
And a lot of this complexity is almost, it's done on purpose almost, because you can hide deception in complexity.
Yes, that's what overflow of information is. That's the whole tactic. When you flood too much information on the internet, it's easy to like hide. So it's inflation of information. It's too much. We're generating complexity.
Banking system. It's like the legal system. It's just so complicated that eventually most people just shrug their shoulders and say, okay, whatever.
So how are we going to pop that bubble, right? So that it deflates it and goes back to the simplicity. We don't know. I think it'll necessarily happen on its own, but it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Now the question is that getting a lot worse going to just kill everything off, and that's done for humanity? I don't know. But,
but we can have our own. We don't have to go along for that ride.
Yeah, And the input, that's what I'm saying. The inputs, that's all about input. Because I talked about output, that the output is there already. We don't have to decide what is balanced. We just have to see what the extremes are and find the balance through there. But input is the problem, really, because we're choosing what the output is, we're always going to direct our input towards that fake center of balance. We're trying to get yang, like you said. We're going on one side of the paradox. We're trying to put the input so that and that's what causes the unbalancing, because it's you're not going to move that balance point to the left or to the right towards that, and because it's infinitely just going to, you see, when you take the point at the middle of the paradox, if you try to shift it left or right, what happens? You're just shifting the whole paradox, right? Or you're inflating one side. It doesn't make any sense. So the input, like you say, if we go back to natural, like really simple, the inputs it'll be clear which inputs we need to put in. Like the inputs will be told to us. That's what I'm saying. The system has the output and the input. It's self-contained. And the input is really, in order for us to give the correct input, we have to be silent. We have to be still. We have to do what you say. So that's why I'm saying we got to combine our theories.
The starting point. Starting point has to be stillness. It can't be, the input has to be stillness. It can't be the output of another thought. That's exactly what we're doing, right? We're reiterating thought until we get to crazy town.
Yes, but that's what I'm trying to say is once you are still, when you wake up from being still, because again, you have no choice, kind of like waking up from your sleep, the world happens again, you have decisions to make, then you can apply paradoxism.
Things become clearer. Things become clearer and more effortless as you go along through this process. I'm testament to this because my life I've gone through a lot of hard work and a lot of shitty stuff. But now, because of my practice, it's very effortless. I don't have to really try to do anything. And my life is manifested in a way that I could never have imagined. Like miracles have occurred in my life and I didn't do anything about it. Like I had nothing to do with it. It just happened. So hey dude, I got shit to do. So I better go do relative stuff.
Sounds good, man.
Let's do this. Let's change the fucking world.
Yeah, well, it's like you say, same thing. I'm not even doing anything. This all happened. Like someone said, hey, do the contest video. I didn't even know what it was about. I just kind of, it's all happening anyway. So great meeting. I'm glad that we kind of seem to clarify things more there.
Did you record this?
Yeah, so I'm going to send it to you again.
Yep. Cool. All right, brother. Let's keep in contact and keep working on this because it's very vital, I think.
Sounds good, Roy. Take care.
All right. Talk to you later.